Okay, we've reached the magic hour of 9 o'clock. All right. Good morning, everyone, and let me welcome each of you to the City of Palm Coast City Council special workshop meeting this morning, Tuesday, June the 25th, 2024. It's 9 a.m., and we are in the community wing of City Hall. So I would ask you all to please stand and join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. Following the pledge, you're welcome to remain standing for a moment of silence to reflect, meditate, pray, or pause for a moment. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I thank you all, and please be seated. And if the clerks would call the roll, please.
Mayor Alpha.
Present.
Vice Mayor Danko.
Here.
Councilmember Hyder.
Present.
Councilmember Clufus.
Present.
Councilmember Pontieri.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We move to item D on the agenda this morning, which is public participation. In order for city staff to be able to respond to your questions or concerns, please fill out a comment card with your contact information. The comment cards can be found on the table near the agendas or available from the Communications and Marketing Director seated in the back. Anyone wishing to speak may approach the podium, provide their name, and may speak for up to 3 minutes. Please direct all comments to the mayor. Be concise and to the point, avoid delaying or interrupting the proceedings, and do not make any irrelevant, impertinent, or slanderous comments. Any person who becomes disorderly may be barred from making any additional comments and may be removed. And with that, I would open up the podium for any members of the public that would like to make a public comment on any item that does not follow in the agenda. Yes, sir.
Hello, there you go. Peter Johnson, Palm Coast. Mayor, I just wanted to address a few things that I've noticed around town recently. One of them being the flickering lights as the LED bulbs go out on all of the roads around town. I've talked to a few different people that are familiar with the issue. They said it is a LED impact or LED driver that is causing that, and that it should be something that is potentially covered in the contract. I'm not saying you should address it per se, but maybe to look in the staff to see if they could be fixed. It's a hazard at 11 o'clock at night in some areas when the lights are flashing. I know people with epilepsy aren't supposed to be driving, but there's always the off chance, in addition to just being, visually appealing. Also, at Belterre, across from like where the laundromat and the Circle K is on the corner, there's a light coming out of that parking lot that seems to be after 7 o'clock at night. It takes like 8 or 9 minutes to shift over, and I've just noticed people are running the red light consistently there. In all fairness, they're literally sitting there for 10 minutes sometimes, and it doesn't shift over. So if that light could also just be looked at as well. Other than that, I look forward to hearing later on about the lobbying presentation, that kind of stuff. I personally, I didn't speak on this last time, and I know this is an agenda item, but it's more public comment based. I think it probably would be a good idea to hear from them why they did what they did and how we got into that position. I think it's a tough conversation that needs to be had, and I think we need to find some sort of accountability. I also agree that they should probably see the door, but I think we should hold them accountable first and listen to what they have to say. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public that would like to comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Stone Street section. Once again, Spectrum came out to the area yesterday.
Thank you.
Bruce Stone Street section. Once again, Spectrum came out to the area yesterday. We had about 10 residents who voiced their concern There were speedsters right in front of the photographer. They are encouraging me to reach out to all the neighborhoods in Palm Coast that have had multiple traffic problems, and they will keep on coming out and filming all the areas in Palm Coast. And Mayor, I want to remind you of something. Last year, you met with me, Steve Carr, Cecilia, and Joe. We discussed the problems with traffic. Joe was a different issue. I brought up what happened in 2012, where a woman was run down in the street like a dog. She was drunk. There were witnesses she was drunk. And what did she get? 1 year of prison time. How do you go back and apologize to the residents of that family? In addition, last meeting, you made a comment that the mayor of Walmy Beach, who I've been to some of their meetings, and I have close contacts with the director of safety, the people did not pay for the speed devices, cushions, tables, lights. It came out of the city budget. Whether you had a miscommunications with them, I don't know, but this needs to stop. And again, Spectrum has encouraged me to reach out to other areas, because they've been out to different areas in Palm Coast multiple times, and when it comes to traffic, nothing gets done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other members? Yes, ma'am. Oh, either way. Cornelia, come.
Good morning, Cornelia Downing Manfrey. I come before you this morning to object to certain communications that are coming from the city. Communication in the old day was a printing press and leaflets handed out on public squares. But today, we use Facebook, TikTok, etc. And
Just bring it a little bit closer, so thank you.
over the last couple of weeks, I've received numerous Instagrams, Facebook announcements, etc., of Mayor Alfin meeting at the City Hall on taxpayer property to meet with the mayor, meeting with the mayor at various locations, including the Southern Rec Center, use of public forums for self-promotion. I object, and I'm asking for this to stop. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Risa Paps, and I'm new to the area.
Go ahead and, Lisa, pull your mic just a little bit closer so the
All right.
folks online can hear you. Thank you.
Hi, Risa Paps. I'm new to the area. I just bought in Palm Coast about 1.5 years ago. I'm very disappointed in the infrastructure of this area. I was very shocked to find out that I couldn't find a doctor, I couldn't find a dentist. It's just insane. You have 200,000 homes, but you have no infrastructure, and we're not working on it. My other question would be, I noticed on this agenda that was supposed to have paperwork attached for the contract with the Southern Group and also the expectations by the City Council, but that was not attached. Where do we get that from, and why is it not attached to the agenda? That's my question.
Oh, thank you for your comment. And if you follow up with the gal in the back staff, she'll help you with that. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Jeffrey Seib.
Morning.
Many of us living here now, possibly some of you, were initially attracted to Palm Coast by the beauty of the natural areas found throughout the city. At City Council meetings and other city events, such as the 2050 Comprehensive Plan public information gatherings, we hear what residents like and what they don't about what's going on now and their future wishes. At all the events where the public speaks out about what they like and want more of, these three things stand out: natural areas, green spaces, and wildlife. These three items in one form or another are repeated over and over as being especially important in a community environment. This is what people want in their hometown. It's logical to assume that the green open spaces are what attract prospective homeowners to our city. Keeping these areas and protecting them where possible is important, and it's incumbent on the council and the staff from top down to realize this fact. We all want local forested areas where we can walk, sit, read a book, or just enjoy the sights and sounds of nature. The mayor and city council should not just let this slip away. It should be a priority. We get a lot of staff attention to big property owner issues, but this is where people want the attention to be. A great city integrates nature into the city environment. This won't happen by itself. On the contrary, the opposite will happen, meaning the loss of green spaces will happen without city attention. Some things the city could offer are stormwater fee reductions for vacant lot owners to encourage them to keep their lots natural in the neighborhoods. Vacant lots are a stormwater plus, meaning they absorb and supply more water to the aquifer than lots with homes. For the large developments, allowing for density increases when significant increases are made in the size of vegetative buffers. For developments with wetland setbacks that are now set at the scientifically inaccurate 25 feet, increase to 50 feet and still allow the same number of units in the development. These and more should be explored and implemented before it's too late, because when it's gone, it's gone. The point is, we need to listen to the people, protect and save our natural areas and open spaces. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there another speaker that would like to address me at this time? Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Mike Solera. I'm in the C section. The code enforcement, I don't know if they're shorthanded, but it doesn't seem like they're keeping up on things. I live on a street where there's an Airbnb. They left on a Tuesday. They put the garbage out there, and the garbage cans were out there until Sunday after they picked them up. And the only reason they got picked up was because the guy that cuts the grass put them back. The people, and we've had issues with this place. I know there's not anything you can do. It's run by the state, but maybe code enforcement could keep up on them. They've had noise complaints. They had people trespassing on our seawalls and stuff. And also, they had a 60-year-old lady that was completely nude going into her trunk, taking stuff out and putting it in the house. Police were called on that. So that, and there's a lot of like trailers that are being left out. That Airbnb there, they only have parking really for 2 cars. They were parking out in the street. So they need to, if they can, try to keep a handle on that. I think that's code enforcement job, and that's the only way we're going to keep these Airbnbs in check, is to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do as far as the amount of occupancies that they have, and that they keep the place clean like they're supposed to and not leave the trash cans out.
Thank you for your comment, and if you would, if you can share your comment with Commander Finn in the back, that might be helpful. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Steve Carr, Palm Coast.
Steve, pull that mic just a little bit closer. Thank you.
Okay.
There you go.
Steve Carr, Palm Coast. Want to thank you for the looks like a very thorough traffic study. Gives a good picture of what's going on within the city. We just need to be cognizant that it's just a snapshot, a small snapshot of what's going on during the whole year. So on Florida Park Drive, I looked at some of the counts there, and there were 6 times that traffic was going 50 to 55 miles per hour. So that's quite a high for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit residential street. And I hope you will constantly look into adopting some kind of traffic calming for residential neighborhoods that's got speeding or even excessive traffic, because the traffic fumes, dust, and noise is horrific. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Does anyone else wish? Yes, ma'am.
Good Good morning. My name is Helen McWilliams, and I live in the old F section.
Morning.
And I'm here to address an issue with one of the roads. Roughly a year and a half ago, it took you guys over 6 months to fix a crack, a dip, the asphalt on Fleetwood. You guys fixed it, and you guys didn't fix it correctly, and it took well over a year for it to finally be fixed correctly. We now have an issue on Fernwood. It's around the house, like when you get on Fernwood, there's a curve. It's around houses 22, 23, 24, somewhere around there. Once again, the road is deteriorated. It's nothing but gravel. This has been going on for well over 4 months. I have talked to my neighbor. My neighbor said he reported it to you guys well over 4 months ago, and something still has not been done about this. We have kids that ride their bikes there. We have older people that ride scooters there, even the cars that are going around the corner. We need to fix our roads in this city before we look at doing anything else. So if you guys could get that fixed, please, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah, is there another speaker that would like to address me at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close public comment. I'll give City Council an opportunity. Did you want to respond to any comment or have staff follow up? It's up to you.
I would like to comment. I think it might be opportune to present the Cimarron, or the Safety on Cimarron study that we worked with the TPO back in 2021, and we had the town hall presentation at the community center for the different options for pedestrian and bicycle safety. That was an elaborate study, but I think that might help show the options for what we have and what we're capable of doing, and also the potential monetary impacts. The other thing that
Councilman, just if I can stop you, are you looking for consensus to make that a future agenda item as a presentation?
I think since it happened back in 2021 when the presentation occurred, I think it might be helpful just for an educational component to distribute to our residents, to have it available to us.
Push it out to the city, fine,
Yeah.
okay.
The other thing I noted here, Airbnb, I wanted to know whether or not, and this is something that I'm just springing right now, Airbnb, we all know that we have these discussions that we have an inability to regulate them because of the state and the county preemptions, but do we have the capability of potentially adding some type of service fee or something along those lines to have an additional code enforcement person that's almost dedicated to making rounds on the Airbnbs, if there was like a registration fee for these Airbnbs in our community?
The fee you can, the demarcation of the fee, I'm not sure, but I think council can weigh in.
So the fee, it's a possibility. I need to look back at the
Understood.
statute when I read it. I don't remember talking about fee, but I can look into that and get back to you.
Awesome, understood. And I think that might help subdue some of the
And my understanding also, Councilman, is that the fee, as it's described in the current legislation, has no, it's not defined in detail, nor does it have a ceiling at this point in time. So it sounds like there may be opportunity, but it's still being debated, I think, in Tallahassee. But
Understood. I
certainly,
just think
certainly
that's
something to keep on the radar.
good discussion for us. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, are they required, the Airbnbs, to be registered as a business with the city? Are the
City
Airbnbs
Manager,
required?
can you comment on that?
No, we consider all rentals, whether it's a short-term or long-term, all the same rental category. So no, they're not required to register as file a local business tax.
I would think that they would be considered a business when they're doing the Airbnb. And I think that we should consider having them register as businesses. I'm not sure that it is possible for this to be done, but I think that it might be a good idea for us to look into this, since we are having several of these incidences going on around the city with problems of trash and so on, the things that we've heard complaints about. I think that that's really important, but they are registered as rental properties.
Yeah, we just voted to increase that registration fee. Actually, if you recall, we were talking about raising it to 35 versus 50.
Right.
I want to say that the statute says we can't treat short-term rentals differently than long-term rentals, but is that true legal? Okay, yeah, so we can't charge them a business tax unless we were going to charge long-term rentals a business tax as well, which I don't know that we want to do, because then you increase the rent for tenants, right? Because they're going to pass that through. So, I mean, I would defer to legal to see if there is anything that we could do there, but I was fairly certain that the statute says we can't treat Airbnbs or Verbos different than your regular lease that is, has a 2-year tenant, for
And
instance.
City Manager, refresh my memory, did we ask for an update or some form of a presentation that's coming up with regard to the Airbnb business here locally?
You asked for a memo done by legal counsel, and that was forwarded all to city council.
So that's as far as we've gone so far. So I would invite city council members to review that memo again and then ask additional questions based on what we have heard more recently or where you think we'd like to go so that we get legal's opinion on what else we can do, because there is more room, but it needs to be crafted legally and properly so that we're not prejudicing the intent of the current legislation and not offering one side or the other an unfair outcome. Fair enough?
Yeah, no, that's accurate, Mayor. And I also just want to, I'm happy to do all that and look into it. I will also say hesitant, if the bill is signed, it won't take effect till January 1st.
Right.
And also, it's, to my knowledge, I looked this morning, it still has not been signed. So there's also a chance that Governor DeSantis could veto it.
So you're telling us that we're ahead of the curve this time?
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Very good.
So, yeah, so then I would just say if there's a way, because I agree with you, Councilman Clufus, if there's a way that we can maybe increase some type of registration fee, maybe a little bit more to have dedicated staff for code enforcement, I think that that's a brilliant idea, and I agree with you, Councilwoman Hyder. I would just like to kind of remind the public that our code enforcement is a complaint-based system. So if you all are seeing issues with Airbnbs in your neighborhoods, please do not be afraid to file a complaint. You can email me and I'll pass it on to staff for you if you want. Please.
Or enter a case.
Or, enter a case on Palm Coast Connect. That is the best way to do it. I know some people, especially, those who aren't used to the system, don't know how to use it. But you're welcome to reach out to us and make a complaint. We don't just peruse streets. We don't have manpower to do that, unfortunately, to look for violations. So make a complaint, and if it's not handled, then, obviously, we welcome you to come here or to reach out to us, separately.
Any other comment this morning?
Just really quickly on the pavement of the road. So there was a comment made about Fernwood. I want to do a shout out really quickly to our utility department, because on Sunday I saw a comment on Nextdoor about a milling issue on Florida Park Drive, I believe. It was a safety hazard. I reached out to our city manager on Sunday morning, and by the afternoon our utility department was out there fixing the problem. So social media is not something that is the best way to communicate with your city officials, but I was just happened to be scrolling that morning. Reach out to us and let us know if something needs to be handled, because our public works and utility departments are just fantastic. They truly are. And your city manager is very on top of things and accessible to us. So if you have an issue, you're welcome to email us. Welcome to, I know that you said a case was put in 4 months ago and it wasn't addressed. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us because we really do try to address those issues, particularly potholes and things like that pose a safety issue in a really expedient manner. And I just have to really shout out to our utility department for handling something like that over the weekend on a Sunday so expeditiously. So please, continue to communicate with us so that we can address those issues.
Vice Mayor.
So I did receive a couple of calls this weekend from a couple of your many opponents for the job of mayor, sort of wondering why the city was kind of promoting your events at, town halls and the flagpole thing. And they asked, they felt it was.
Can I just back you up on that for a second?
Yeah, but if I could just.
Those promotions, I think, had all of us.
They did. Mine was definitely promoted as well.
Yeah.
And your picture was there too.
Right. But I'm just, there were separate ones with you too that I've seen that the city has sent out.
For each of us as the event came up, yes.
So, but anyway, they asked, they said this seemed a bit unfair this close to an election, and I said, well, fair comes to the county about once a year. You should enjoy it. But what I am concerned about is it, I'd like to ask our council, is this legal? Do we have can you get us a opinion based on some actual case history, rulings and stuff? Because we are very close to an election, and it does give the appearance that perhaps we are supporting myself or Mr. Clufus or the mayor, And I just want to let the public know that I've made the decision, and I've informed our city manager, I'm not going to do any town halls or events of that nature until after the election. I would like to ask the other two candidates here to join me in that, at least until we get a legal ruling.
I appreciate the comment. I would have to give deference to our founding fathers, where the town hall concept is deeply woven into
I
our
agree.
flag and into the very history of our country. Now, it would be up to each city council member to be very careful about not using such a platform to campaign, but we have all up here, every one of us has voted repeatedly for additional transparency, and you've heard it from the public about more transparency. I don't know how you could be more transparent than to make yourself available to your public on any question they want to ask. Now, if they should ask a question that goes offline with regard to a campaign, then you have to be good enough to say, hey, that's not what this is all about. So appreciate the comment, but I'm not okay with yielding to what has been a foundational pillar of this country and our democracy and our republic since its founding.
Well, my concern, though, is that we're using taxpayer dollars this close to an election to fund this, and that's why I'm asking our legal counsel if we can get an opinion and if there's any case law or rulings that involve this. Again, we are so close. We are weeks away from absentee ballots. And again, I've already told Brittany and Lauren that I won't be doing any of these events because we are so close to an election. So I'd like to get a legal opinion if we can, and I'd like to have some case law and stuff to back it up.
Also for posterity, though, we just had our events, so it's not like we're not doing
Well, our
it.
events were back in April,
Wait.
Nick.
The
That was
vice mayor,
back in April.
the vice mayor has a question for council, so council, please
So I will
respond.
tell you, without having case law, as long as you are using it for a public purpose that's not into elections or campaigning, and you're using it for the service of the city, I see no issues. However, if it is consensus of this dais that you do want me to draft up something with case law, I'm happy to do so.
I'd like to see something legal, just so we don't cross a line. We may not be crossing a line, but I understand how the other candidates might see it as that, and I don't want to give that type of impression to the public.
When would you like that back?
Do I have a
As soon as you
consensus
can.
from city council to have council go ahead and just draft us up an informative memo that would make sure that we're on the right
Yeah,
path? Is that
just
okay?
come back and say this,
At the taxpayer's
Yeah.
expense?
Well, it is,
Okay,
but
all right.
I think that, unfortunately,
Okay.
again, giving that appearance, and sometimes appearance is all that matters. Reality is totally different. Like I said, fair comes to the county once a year.
Very good.
I know that, so I just wanted to bring that to
Appreciate-
attention, since we did have one of the candidates speaking about
Appreciate
this
your
today.
comment. Okay, go ahead. Let's
Yeah,
not go
just-
too deep in this, but.
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep in it either, but I don't have a dog in this fight. So I think it's actually incumbent upon our local officials, whether you're running or not, to make yourself accessible to the public. So one of our SAP priorities was to do town halls. Matter of fact, I got an email from staff this morning wanting to reschedule my next town hall. So I understand the concern, but I think that it's misplaced, and I do have a problem. I mean, I'm going to give consensus, but I do have a problem spending our taxpayer dollars for a memo for case law. Furthermore, excuse me, there are certain things that we cannot do as a candidate, such as using the city logos, the county logos, things like that in an official capacity. And those are explicit in the current law. So again, I think that as long as, we're making sure that we stay within those bounds, that the town hall should be encouraged, not
Yeah,
discouraged.
so let's defer to council's memo, so we'll get that. And that shouldn't, I mean, you could have that for us now, if I may, I would ask that that be sent to city manager and then spread to, or shared with all city council members. Don't wait for the next meeting. Since time seems to be of the essence, let's get it out to everybody sooner than later. Fair enough?
I'll make it a priority, Mayor.
Very good, thank you. With that, I will close public comment, and then we will move to item E on the agenda today, which are presentations. The first presentation is the capital projects and funding challenges, and I think City Manager, are you going to intro this for us, or?
Yes, and while staff is getting started, I wanted to share just a couple quick updates from public comment. Staff is already working on the dip in the road that's on Fernwood. They're actively going out there now, as well as Mr. Johnson's request on the lights at Belterre and Palm Coast Parkway. So City Council, if you will recall, you directed staff on June 11th workshop to come back with a presentation on our capital projects, our funding challenges or tools that could be used, and then what do we look like as far as comparable cities. So myself, Carl Cody, and Helena Alves are going to give you this presentation. On the next slide is kind of the outline that we're going to go through, which is a funding matrix. Again, what are those funding challenges or sources, those major capital projects, unfunded programs, the opportunity to explore public-private partnerships, what happens in an emergency event situation, economic development, and then I'll conclude us with comparable cities. So I'm going to let Carl take it from here.
Thank you. Carl, you have the floor.
Morning.
So good morning, Mayor, City Council. Helena Alves, Financial Services Director. As stated, this is a follow-up to the workshop of June 11th. As you recall, Joel Tyndall with Hilltop Securities presented to Council information on municipal debt instruments and repayment security. I'm doing a brief overview before turning it over to Carl for project-specific challenges. Municipal borrowing can take various forms, such as bonds, notes, loan agreements, lease purchase agreements. Since cities typically don't secure debt with the asset, as in your typical mortgage, cities have to give the lender a security interest in pledged revenue sources, which that pledged source can be enforced by legal action. So as you can see in the matrix, there are different types of debt, have different types of pledged revenues and specific requirements. We'll start with general obligation, typically called GO bonds. They are secured by ad valorem taxing power, and this will give lenders the ability to compel unlimited increases on annual property tax levies as necessary to repay the debt. A referendum is required by both statutes and the city charter. Revenue obligations, or debt that is not general obligation, is secured by revenue sources other than ad valorem. So common revenue bond security sources are water, wastewater utility revenues, stormwater utility revenues, your tax increment, special assessments, some local option surtaxes, as well as the covenant to budget and appropriate all legally available non-ad valorem revenues. A referendum is not required by statute and is required by city charter for most revenue obligations extending 36 months or greater than 15 million. In the case of public-private partnerships, much depends on the agreement between the parties since it is project-specific. A referendum is not required by statute and is required by city charter if secured payments are being made by city revenues. Another example of enterprise debt, meaning water, wastewater, stormwater debt, where repayments are secured by the net revenues of utility systems. So in this case, a referendum is not required by statute and it's not required by city charter. Same for special assessment, since debt is secured by benefited properties and not made by city revenues. Do we have any questions on the funding matrix before I turn it over to Carl?
Anyone with a question at this point in the presentation? No, please continue.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, I'm going to go through some of the various categories of specific funding options. The first one we're going to discuss is major capital projects. The funding for the new fire stations is for Fire Station 22 and 26 is primarily funded with fire impact fees at 91.8% impact fees, and the other funding to account for the balance of 9.2%. Per the last study that was completed in 2018. Over the past 5 years, there have been excessive increases in construction costs for all types of construction projects. The Fire Impact Fee Fund is unique as this fund has a limited number of projects. Due to the limited number of projects, the cost is spread over a long period of time. Since the last fire station was completed in 2009, the Impact Fee Fund has only collected just over $4.4 million in fire impact fees to be used for these two fire stations. By looking at the chart on the slide, you can clearly see that the city has not collected enough impact fees to construct these two stations. However, as you heard by the fire department, these are both urgently needed to meet the level of service and cannot wait for enough fire impact fees to be collected. The city has worked diligently to seek additional funding and has allocated nearly $3.5 million in ARPA funding and sought appropriations for both stations, for which we received $5 million for station number 26. In order to proceed with construction, there is a need to transfer $3.5 million in the current year appropriated fund balance, as well as advancing $3.5 million from the Capital Projects Fund. In the future, fire stations are a perfect type of project to utilize a loan or bond, as the station will serve new residents far into the future. Due to the current funding requirements, the city must be under contract for construction by the end of 2024, and there is a cost savings to construct both stations concurrently. This additional funding will need to be approved as part of the upcoming budget. You will note on the right-hand side of the slide that the current funding limitations only funding option is for the City Council to go to the voters with a referendum to approve a loan or bond to be covered by millage. If the charter were changed, then Council would have the option to obtain a loan or bond to fund the project leveraging fire impact fees. There will be a need in our 5-year CIP to construct an additional station located in the northwest portion of the city, which will be a perfect opportunity to use of a loan, utilizing future impact fees to fund the loan rather than waiting another 10+ years to accumulate enough impact fees to construct. And you can see we are also in the upcoming budget, we had previously discussed advancing the fire impact fee update from fiscal year 26 to fiscal year 25, and we've included funds in the CIP to accomplish that. Any questions on this particular slide before we move forward?
Anyone? No. Please proceed.
Actually, I do have one question. Is there any type of fire service fee that we're not implementing that, could you just talk about what that's capable of funding, whether or not that would be something like a fire prevention fee similar? Are there any details around that?
Do you want to have them research that for you?
Kind of, sort of.
I think we're going to have to research that. Legal is here, they can probably speak to it, but my understanding is that fire assessment would only cover fire, it wouldn't cover the emergency management services part of our staff, and it would have to be, I believe, in conjunction with the other entities around us, but, I mean, legal would be a much better source of information on this.
Understood, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councilman?
Yeah.
Okay. Good try.
Fair, always looking.
So we have another major capital project. The Maintenance Operations Center project has been a council priority for many years, with funding being allocated to the project beginning in fiscal year 20. There are numerous funds utilized for this project, with the primary funding coming from utility, stormwater, and capital funds. At the end of this fiscal year, it's projected that $9.7 million has been spent on master planning, design services, land acquisition, wetland conservation easement release, and wetland impacts, with an additional $1.3 million in additional encumbrances, which will be spent in the upcoming budgets. Due to the size and cost of the project, the intention is to construct the project in phases, with phase 1 consisting of the fleet building, fuel depot, and wash facility. There currently is a shortfall in capital funds due to the high project costs, and with the limited available capital project funding available after allocations for park and facility R&R, as well as allocations for impact fees to fund the existing citizen fair share portion of new capacity projects. The stormwater rate included funding of the MOC in the rate study, and there are allocations identified and included in the fiscal year 25, 26, and 27 CIP budgets for stormwater. The utility fund is unable to provide allocations, as the utility funds from utility rates are being utilized to fund increases in operational costs as well as utility R&R projects. Without an increase in utility rates or another funding mechanism, the MOC will not be able to be completed. You will note on the right-hand side of the slide, the current funding limitations only allow City Council to issue loans for stormwater and utility funds, or City Council could go to the voters with a referendum to approve a loan or bond to be covered by millage. If the charter were changed, then the council would have the option to utilize a loan or bond to fund the general fund portion of the project. Any questions on this particular slide?
So I would just ask, we've done, in my 8 years on the council, we've been saving this money up for the last 4 or 5 years. If we don't continue to fund this at an adequate pace, how much more is this going to cost to complete? So I know when we first started talking about this years ago and we started funding this and saving away for it, things were different.
Yeah, you would think, I did look back at our fire stations we're building. The last one we built was on Fire Station 24 in Palm Harbor. It opened in 2009. We paid about $2 million for that project. Now we're up at $10 million for construction. So, it's roughly 4 or 5 times the cost in the past 15 years. So, borrowing money is much less expensive than dealing with construction increases. Of course, if you look long-term, construction typically goes up about 3% a year on average, but we've had some drastic increases. Obviously, 2009 was probably the bottom. It was probably lower than it was in 2000, So it's not the best comparison, but costs have gone up drastically.
Understood.
Councilwoman?
To piggyback on that, you said that the cost of which we've seen this, the CPI is usually around 3%, or maybe a little over. What is the average interest rate that we've been getting on our loans in order to fund the projects that we have taken out loans for?
Okay, so same as your construction costs, there's been quite an increase in the cost of short-term of borrowing, right? So most of our loans are before these increases. So we were very lucky and fortunate that most of our loans are around that 2.5% interest rate, but that is not what borrowing costs today, right? The rates that are included in the rate studies are as high as 6 and 7%.
We were strategic too. It wasn't all luck. We also refinanced some of them, right?
Yes, we did take advantage of some refinancing opportunities. I want to say in 2021 before all of the increases, so we were very fortunate. I think one of our refinances was like a $7 million savings. So, yeah.
So for the loans that we have, the 2 to 2.5%, those aren't revolving, right? They are revolving?
No, those
Or they're not?
No, they're
Okay.
fixed rate
Okay.
term loans.
Okay, so we can't take advantage in any way? There's no mechanism
No.
that, okay.
No, even if we're going to take additional funding, it would be considered a new issue, and it would be at the current rate. So right now is not the time to touch any of the debt that we have. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jimmy, what are eligible for SRF loans? Because I think I see where you're going. Some of those SRF loans, we're talking tenths of % of interest, but what is eligible for an SRF loan?
So if there is a project that is eligible for SRF, and Carl is much better at this than I am, we definitely go the SRF route. There are several benefits. The interest rates are better. You don't borrow up front and start paying, right? You start paying once you're done with your project, so there's savings right there, and the cost of those borrowings are less, the closing costs, the professional.
And what makes something eligible? What makes a project eligible for SRF loans?
A lot of times it has to do with water quality. We've used it on our wastewater treatment plant. Our current expansion now is an SRF loan. We used it dredging the freshwater canals in the east section was an SRF loan. So we've used SRF loan primarily with our utility projects, and sometimes we are able to accommodate our stormwater projects.
Understood.
So you don't pay until project completion, but it would behoove the city council or the budget to accrue in advance of that, right? Because you're going to have to pay the bill at the end.
So we're using our own cash flows while you're building the project, right? So you submit reimbursements to the state as you spend it, so you need that cash flow. And at the end, that's when you have, at the end of your project, that's when you have an actual closing on the loan and your payments start. So if you're going to plan on closing in the next fiscal year, then we will budget the principal and interest payments accordingly.
But utilizing the cash flow means that that cash isn't being directed to something else at the time.
It is planned. We planned our working capital around the capital
But
projects.
it's still reducing your cash flow if you're going to accrue for that. Okay, I got it.
Correct,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Depending on how much you borrow is going to impact,
Right.
because you need your coverage
Okay.
as well, so there's limitations.
All right, please proceed.
We'll get into the utility system. Per the rate study in '24, this fiscal year was completed that covered rates, charges for fees, services, and impact fees. City Council approved the water and wastewater impact fee increases. The capital projects associated with water and wastewater capacity projects total almost $220 million. Whoops. Due to the increased operating costs, there is insufficient funding to support the necessary R&R projects. Staff has updated the R&R 5-year CIP to complete necessary projects, but this still requires over $13 million in loans. The use of loans for an R&R projects is not recommended, but could be used for costly projects if necessary. You'll note on the right-hand side of the slide, the utility fund will not be impacted by a change in the charter, as the utility fund already can obtain loans and bonds. The concern with the proposed loan is the ability to provide sufficient loan coverage, and if that impact fees are used for coverage and payments, the impacts to CIC fees will need to be drastically increased in the future. So next we're going to talk about unfunded programs. Actually, you can go back. Any questions on this slide before we move on?
I have none.
Good.
So one of the city's unfunded or underfunded programs is the pavement management program. From 2003 to 2012, the county had imposed a half-cent sales surtax. That revenue went to funding the milling and resurfacing program. During the 10 years that funding was in place, the city milled and resurfaced roughly 650 lane miles of roadway. In the 10 years since that funding source expired, the city has milled and resurfaced less than 200 lane miles of roadways. However, we're able to construct new roadways or resurface additional roadways as part of some of the roadway improvement projects with the assistance of grant funding. In 2017, the city hired Transmap to perform data collection to establish the quality of the roadway network. The scans included a light radar, LiDAR, which uses a computer algorithm to evaluate the roadway condition and establishes a pavement condition index map of the city. This map gives a visual representation of the current quality of the roadways. This map and the data behind it are used to identify individual roadways and clusters of roadways that are in most need of repair. Transmap performed the second roadway condition scan in 2021 to generate an updated pavement condition index map. In order to maintain the current condition of the roadways, the city needs to invest $7.5 million per year if global treatments are continued to be utilized for residential roadways, and $10 million is if only milling and resurfacing is utilized. The current 5-year annual shortfall is $4.5 million if we continue to defer certain projects like sidewalks, median beautification, neighborhood entry signs, as well as no major increased needs in other street and traffic signal R&R projects. Unfunded programs that have an ongoing expense are not an option for use of a loan or bond. Therefore, these types of programs do not benefit from a charter change. You'll note on the right-hand side of the slide that city staff has presented City Council 3 options to fund the pavement management program, all of which were never approved. In lieu of City Council approving a funding source, the Council has the option to go to the voters with a referendum to approve a utility tax or dedicated millage to fund the pavement management program. Any questions on the information on this slide?
Just a clarification, are you saying that if we wanted to be able to fund this, we would have to raise the millage by that amount each year?
No, you'd have to dedicate roughly per the current update we got in June, based on the value of taxes, it would be 0.4735. You'd have to dedicate this current upcoming fiscal year for 25 to pavement management. And it would be adjusted in the future based on the valuation of the property tax.
And the property values in the future as
Okay.
it goes.
So of the current millage, we'd have to dedicate that amount in order to fund
Or
just for
increase
this
it by
year?
that much. You'd have to
Or
increase it by
increase it.
that much.
Got
yes.
it, okay.
Because All the other millage,
Because the money's fungible, right? So if we dedicate that amount towards roads, it's coming from something else.
right, you have to increase millage by that amount. And utility tax, the percentage would be based on what utility tax you go after or implement.
Okay,
So then we're going to talk about public-private partnerships, which is commonly referred to as P3s. A public-private partnership municipal lease, P3, can be utilized for various types of projects. The Parks Master Plan recommended developing additional flat fields as well as indoor sports and recreation opportunities. A feasibility study was completed, which identified facility components and financial review for a sports complex. A P3 is when the private side develops the project as a private project with an agreement to lease the improved facility back to the city for a predetermined amount. It doesn't use city bond capacity and ensures the city maintains control of the use of the facility as the master leaseholder. The private side operates the complex. A P3 was recommended as it creates an economic impact, regional spending, and supports development. Visitors pay the bulk of the cost, and if the financial model supports positive cash flow, the facility can support itself. You will note on the right-hand side of the slide that the only current P3 agreement limitations only option is for City Council to go to the voters with a referendum to approve the P3 agreement. If the charter were changed, then the council would have the option to enter into P3 agreements. And, obviously, as you move through this process, we'd be working, you saw a conceptual plan, but the next steps would be working through, the final programming elements. We'd have to draft an updated concept plan. So this is just preliminary that we're looking at here, and it would be refined as we would move through the process if that's where council wanted to go in the future on a project like this.
Carl, just for the benefit of the public and perhaps those that are virtual, do you have an example of one or two P3s that you're familiar with locally that people could understand, kind of frame what we're talking about here?
I know when this project was presented, I think they had dozens of these P3 agreements across the country that were being similar projects to this specifically. That were being constructed across the country.
Okay. As you can individually, just if you find a couple examples that city council members could be made aware of.
I'll find some local ones to Florida and pass those along to council members.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'll try and get a variety of projects. So next we're going to talk about emergency event recovery. So the current city budget includes a disaster reserve fund to be utilized to address city costs after a catastrophic event such as a hurricane or tornado. The current charter has time and dollar limits that limit the city's ability to address the disaster recovery efforts. You will note on the right-hand side of the slide that if the charter were changed, then council would have the option to utilize a loan or bond to provide necessary funding. However, there are still limitations on the amount that could be borrowed, and future millage would have to be increased to cover the cost of the loan. I show an example here, of potential bridge failure. That's big dollar. It would exceed the cost that we have in a reserve fund. And typically, those reserve funds are used for debris removal, other components of, cleaning up after those disasters. They're not made to address the impacts or the major items that could fail during those events. So then we're going to talk about economic development. The current city budget includes limited funds to be utilized for economic development. The current tax base of Palm Coast is 90% residential and 10% commercial. To encourage non-residential development, the city has identified Track 17 on the corner of US 1 and PV Grade as a site to market for an industrial site park. This site was chosen due to being located on a 4-lane divided highway, US 1, that is less than 2 miles to I-95. There are excellent capacity for electric as it is close proximity to an FPL substation. There's available water, wastewater, and reclaim infrastructure due to the adjacency to water plant number 3 and wastewater plant 2, and gas is located along US 1. In an April 2004 report released by the Site Selectors Guild, 82% of the 68 site selectors surveyed globally strongly agreed that the availability of development-ready sites will with sufficient infrastructure capacity will be the top driver of where companies decide to set up their production facilities in 2024. Speed to market is a top priority for businesses seeking locations. A city-owned site provides better ability to develop, negotiate, etc., compared to a private landowner or holding company. This slide identifies various items that could be completed to assist in marketing this site, such as site clearing, site grading, constructing stormwater ponds, and obtaining entitlements. However, additional funding is necessary to complete these items. You will note on the right-hand side of the slide that Council currently only has the option to go to voters with a referendum to approve a loan or bond. If the charter were changed, then Council would have the option to utilize a loan or bond, leveraging funds fees to cover the payment.
Question, anyone?
And then we're going to finish off with comparable cities, and I'll turn it back over to Lauren.
Actually, can you go back to the previous slide real quick?
Thank you, Nick.
I know that we have this economic incentive of $115,000. Could you just talk about what it would cost to do some of these things listed below? Because honestly, just
It depends.
ballpark
Site 17
numbers.
is fairly large. There were some preliminary sketches done on the site. The one that is shown is three 50,000 square foot buildings with parking and stormwater ponds on the northern portion, in the upper half of Track 17. Site clearing, we compared some costs, like on London Waterway, the big tract of land that we cleared for the stormwater pond. We looked at the clearing and grubbing it. I want to say it was in the $40,000 to $50,000 per acre to clear and grub that land. And then, depending on the amount of fill we would have to bring in, we would have to run some calculations based on which layout we wanted to do. Or you could get the fill material from the ponds. We'd have to run some calculation. We'd have to finalize how much of the site do we want to develop? What do we want to plan for to have a pad-ready site? Do we want to do all of those items? Purchasing entitlements, I think is, again, it depends on how much of the area you want to dedicate and have ready as a pad-ready site. So this could go anywhere from, a couple $100,000 probably to $1 million or more. It all depends how much you want to do.
And, without a plan, I don't have an opinion, but I do have to just footnote, and Nick, you're aware of this, the county did an experiment with a construction just north of there, which sat, empty for years, I think, before it finally took hold and became a viable example of economic development. So it's just, and again, I'm not opposed, but obviously there is risk with any investment that we offer forward. So again, not negative, it's just that we have to be conscious of that.
We spend $200,000 to $1 million, but we don't know if we're going to have any takers after we do it, correct? We hope we do.
Right, correct.
Right. So would we not maybe be better off, just a suggestion, but offering some sort of incentive to investors to offset the cost of doing that?
One thing, our economic development staff member can speak to it, but from what I heard from him was that used to be the case, but now due to the cost increases and the speed to opening, having a pad-ready site is much more important to the people looking for a site. If you don't have a pad-ready site, they're looking elsewhere.
Okay, and that's why I'm asking these questions, because I don't have the answer to them. But I'd like to see some information showing that difference, showing where it used to be you offer incentives, now that's not working, but here's some other cities that have done this, and here is their success rate. I'd like to see some facts on this before we proceed. And if it's a good thing, then it's a good thing.
Just in order to help staff, let's just reel that in just a little bit. My first suggestion would be that each of us, when we can, have a meeting with our Director of Economic Development. And then perhaps after that, we be a little bit more specific about what you want to see from staff, just so they don't, because that's a very broad, that's a very broad ask.
But give me 5 cities that have done this in the last 5 years and show me their track record. I mean, something pretty simple, but something that establishes, yes, this works, or it doesn't work as well as we thought. And again, I don't have the answers.
Right.
If I may, because this was something that I've been really, really advocating for, and if city manager provided me kind of a project lead history of some examples, and I can make it a part of the record if you guys would like, so that way everybody can access it, and the public can as well. But we're talking about good salaries, good paying jobs, a lot of capital coming into the communities, a lot of expenses that then those companies are actually expending, and then that's the active dollars, that's not the passive economic. And I don't want to get deep into this, that's not the point of this presentation, but I will make this part of the record for you all, because it is something, I get what you're saying, but definitely something that I think the ROI is there for, so I don't want to derail the presentation.
No,
but
so
I'll make
give it
this
to the
part of
clerk,
record.
perfect. Thank you for that, very
And
good.
the point of this slide was just to show you that there's currently, if council wanted to do something, there's no way to fund it currently in our funding mechanisms, so.
And if I could, Councilman Clufus, based on your institutional knowledge over such a long term, are there any specific barriers that you want to point out that we can know about as we try to increase our prioritization of economic development? Anything that you have consistently run afoul of over these last 8 years?
Well, I would say the economic opportunities as far as programs like the Rev Grants and things like this are something that we put a high priority on. Welcome back, Jason. I think that's a great way to be able to attract and spur commerce in our area. I think we put a high priority on those type of programs. I know the Chamber of Commerce has a set of 5 programs that they're trying to implement. I think the County Commission adopted 3 of them. I think those are the type of incentives and initiatives that we're going to be more successful with in the future. Prior, the experience that I've had is, for instance, when we gave Palm Coast Data all of that money up front, that wasn't successful. So we kind of moved away from that model, and we've moved towards more of a performance-based model. I think that is setting us up to be successful in the future.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Carl?
And
So again, I'll
I'm
move
sorry,
it, I'll pass it back to Lauren.
Sorry.
no problem. So just to conclude us here, Mayor and City Council, we did a cursory review of our surrounding cities' charter. While every city is very unique, their charter is set up to govern accordingly. The city of Deltona does not have similar contractual authority in their charter like you do, but they do have an established debt policy in their charter. You, City Council, have a resolution 2013-111 that establishes your debt policy. The city of St. Augustine does not have similar language. The city of Bunnell does not have similar language. The city of Flagler Beach has section 2.10, which is action regarding ordinances and resolutions, and that's how they set rates for their utility department or franchise fees, et cetera. And the city of Daytona Beach, I did not find any type of similar language. So I just wanted to provide you that information.
I appreciate that, and if I may, I have a comment to make. Go ahead first.
Yeah, just a quick question for clarification. When you say they don't have similar language, are we saying that they don't have the same restrictions as we have in our charter?
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm going to offer a comment for discussion. At the end of this discussion, we're going to try to come together with a consensus so that we can direct staff based on, and I want to thank you, staff. I think that's an excellent snapshot excellent snapshot and presentation on your item today. So based on the information that you all provided today, I'm going to ask for purposes of discussion that we seek a consensus to direct staff to draft a charter amendment regarding City Council contractual authority to be submitted for voter approval at the next general election. The proposed amendment should clearly define the scope and limitations of the City Council's authority to enter into contracts on behalf of the city. And secondarily, staff is directed to present the draft charter amendment to the City Council at the next business meeting, which is a timing element. So I offer that out as a comment for City Council to discuss at this time.
I'm all in favor of putting anything on a ballot and letting the public decide an issue like this. I think we need to have, obviously, some detail when they come back. It has to be very specific. So not only that we know, but the public needs to know what they're getting into. And again, I'm not taking any position of support or non-support at this time. And again, I trust the public and their ability to vote on an issue like this. So that's where I stand on it.
Councilwoman?
Thank you. So I'm definitely in favor of putting this out to the public. I think that it's really important that we understand what we're allowing ourselves to do, which is invest in our infrastructure in more of a proactive way rather than a retroactive way, which is what we've been doing. To the public comment that we heard earlier, our infrastructure is struggling, and it's because we're saving money and then spending rather than kind of borrowing. And actually, this is a way to allow future growth to pay for the growth, because essentially what we're saying is we're going to borrow against possibly the impact fees, for instance, for the fire station. So we're borrowing against the impact fees that are going to come in the future from that future development rather than our current residents kind of fitting the bill, which is something that I have been very ardently against since taking this seat. So I think there's definitely benefit in taking this route. Additionally, if you look at the charter right now, for us to not be able to enter into a contract over $15 million, I mean, inflationary numbers alone, in today's dollars, that's about 27 million, right? So we're really handcuffed in what we can do and how we can invest in the growth and the safety and the infrastructure and all those things for our city. So I'm definitely in favor of this. I would just like to say, though, I do want guardrails. I do not want this to become the Wild West of borrowing. So as staff is looking to draft the ordinance, let's make sure we're being very diligent and pay attention to detail as to the limitations that we still do currently put on ourselves so that we're not putting ourselves in a bad predicament for the future.
Good comment, thank you. Councilwoman?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Vice Mayor Danko and Councilwoman Pontieri.
Okay, and Councilman Clufus?
Could you go back to the athletic facility slide?
The which slide?
The athletic facility slide with the lease purchase option on there. Perfect. So this is what it comes down to, is that we're trying to get something on the ballot. I don't know if anyone in here who hasn't attended one of our meetings before understands what the sports complex is or how we're trying to define our future and set our own path. I think this is an incredible opportunity to educate the public. I think we will have tremendous buy-in if we can say, hey, do you know about the potential $93 million sports complex that could bring a ton of money into our local economy and also bring in tourism dollars? I support this because I am looking at it holistically, like I believe the rest of our council is, that in order to bring these type of projects to fruition, we need to make these type of changes. But I think we need to do a really, really intentional, diligent job educating the public on what this can potentially unlock as far as not only local development, but county level development and the future as a whole. A development and a sports complex like this could change the trajectory of Palm Coast and the actual face of our city and the reason why people come and enjoy our town and our county, or our city, I should say. So I think we have a really big opportunity here to say, hey, we want to be able to enter into these public-private municipal leases and agreements. We want to be able to borrow more, but here is why, and here's what this future could look like if we choose to go this path. So I support everything that council has said up to this point. I think it's the right way to go forward, but I think it's really, really important, especially in a time of elections, that we try to not garner public support, but educate, because the support will come if we educate properly.
Thank you, Councilman. So, City Manager, above any objection from City Council members, do you have sufficient direction to bring it back at your earliest opportunity so that we can have a robust debate and discussion on City Council?
Yes, Mayor, the direction is understood.
Very good. And staff, I want to thank you again for your presentation. I thought it was very well done today, so thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to item number 2 under Section E, which would be a presentation regarding Brown & Brown Insurance. It's an overview.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. Renina Fuller, Director of Human Resources. We have Danielle Boyle here with us today from Brown & Brown. Brown & Brown is our third-party administrator for our health insurance, and she's going to be going over some highlights on the rising healthcare costs.
Welcome, and you have the floor.
Let's do the slideshow.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all again. I was here last year, so this will be kind of a recap similar to what we did before. What we have today is a summary of your renewal for the 2024-2025 plan year for the self-funded health insurance plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So first, we'll look at some population insights, looking at your demographics of your group, which many health insurance costs are tied to the demographics of a group. So a public sector city like the city of Palm Coast tends to keep employees for longer, and as we age, we incur more expensive healthcare costs in general. But it's great that you provide such strong benefits for your employees, and that's a very important retention and attraction tool, which we understand. We'll look at what makes up a self-insured health plan cost, because unlike a fully insured group, where the insurance company tells you how much your costs are and charges you the premium for that, the city is self-insured, which allows you to save money on years where you have good claims years. And whenever you have an increase in claims costs, you have to budget accordingly to make sure that you have the funds there to spend. So we will look at the claims versus budget and a renewal projection as well. As of now, the city has a total of 542 eligible employees for your health insurance plan with an average age of 45 and an average length of employment of 7.2 years. 76% men and 24% women. The enrolled population for your medical are in the middle, so you've got 481 employees that enrolled in coverage, whereas you had 66 that waived coverage. What we like to look at here is the average age of those enrolled versus those who waived, because many times city employees stay along after they're eligible for Medicare. And if they are eligible for Medicare, they may have a better option taking a Medicare supplement or that type of plan. Your demographic, your age is pretty consistent across the total, the enrolled, and the waived. The waived is slightly higher, which we do like to see. You have 7 employees that are age 65 or older, and they have opted to take Medicare in this situation. So just a recap of what makes up a health plan cost when you're self-insured. You pay administrative fees to Blue Cross Blue Shield. They are your third-party administrator. They pay the claims. They give you a network to access to keep your costs down. They also provide reporting and customer service for your employees. Stop-loss premiums, which are your insurance coverage, so you're not completely self-insured. A group your size, you need to have some stop-loss there. So you are capped at $175,000 for each one person that's enrolled on the plan. So if someone has a really catastrophic illness, you are capped at that $175,000, and there's a premium that you pay for that protection. You have aggregate stop-loss, which caps the exposure for the whole plan. So what if things just run poorly in general? Is our risk, does it go forever? No, it's capped at 125% of what the stop-loss carrier expects your costs to be. So they'll project forward, and then you're capped at 25% above that, and that's standard for aggregate coverage. The biggest variable is going to be your claims expense. So you have medical and pharmacy claims. Medical is doctor's visits, labs, hospitals, anything like that. And then pharmacy would be what you go to the pharmacy and pick up your prescriptions, or if you're on a specialty medication, self-administered injectables, those sorts of things. Medical trend has stabilized a little bit. We're seeing it between 8 and 11%. For the year after COVID, it was slightly above that. We saw a major rebound. That has started to level off more on the medical side, but pharmacy continues to be a cost driver at 15 to 25%, depending on the mix of specialty medications and what's being filled. So a recap of what we did last year, because last year there was a lot of marketing effort that went on your behalf. So we marketed all lines of coverage, and in the insurance world, that doesn't mean marketing and advertising. It means securing quotes and proposals on your behalf. We extended your contract with Florida Blue for 4 more years and got some enhancements to that contract for the city. Packaged the dental, life, and disability with Florida Blue for additional wellness funds, which are shown here, $150,000 for the first year, $75,000 for year 2, and then $35,000 for years 3 and 4. We carved out your pharmacy. So if you remember, that was a big decision last year. Pharmacy is such a significant cost driver that we wanted to do something to really manage that cost while still providing a valuable benefit to your employees. So we did carve out the pharmacy. We had improvements in the pricing of those medications as well as the rebate structure. So anytime someone goes and fills a medication that's a brand or a specialty medication, there is a rebate that's associated with that medication. And under a bundled approach like you had with Florida Blue was keeping more of that money that was tied to rebates, and RX Benefits is passing that through and with higher guarantees. Dental, life, and disability rates were guaranteed for 2 more years, or for 2 years, And the overall increase, even with all of those improvements on the fixed costs, was a 20% lift to your funding last year, and that was driven heavily by your claims activity. So far this year through May, because we do have reporting through May, the plan is running about $197,000 over budget still, including those pharmacy rebates that we've received so far this plan year and any stop-loss reimbursements. We ran over budget 7 out of the 8 months so far this plan year, and there are 13 what we call high-cost claimants, and that's anyone that's over $50,000. You've had 2 claimants that have hit your stop-loss so far this plan year. You'll probably have 2 more, depending on how everything pans out the next couple of months.
I have a quick question on this. Is this where we are year-to-date, or is this projected for the entire year?
This is where you are year-to-date.
Okay, so that $197,000 figure could still go up before the fiscal year is over?
Correct.
And just so I'm clear, that $197,000 on the previous slide, how much does that represent of the total percentage of the expectant? So basically, how much of that 25% that we have capped over at the 125% limit, how much does that represent?
Ooh, that is a good question. Hold on. Let me do the quick math. So a 12% is $885,000. So that is, what do you say, about 2 to 3%
Okay.
over?
Understood. Okay. Nice math, too.
So for the renewal, we have looked at this with our actuary, and this is, like, I want to repeat, this is not the insurance carrier coming at you for more money. This is an actuarial projection, and it's an independent actuary. It's not someone that works for Florida Blue. So the recommendation is a 12% increase to funding, and that is to ensure that you have enough money to pay all of the claims and fixed costs for your next plan year. And this is a conservative estimate. It did come out slightly below that, and after looking at how claims have been spiking up month by month, we are recommending the 12% to add a little bit of cushion there. The admin fees are not increasing. They're guaranteed, so this is truly just an increase in claims costs. The total of that 12% is $885,000. And just for context, the city currently pays 88% of the total cost of the plan. Percentages range between 94% for single coverage. You do a lot for those with single coverage, and you actually are a very generous plan for those with family coverage as well when I look at your peers. So the lowest percentage that you pay is 81% of a family coverage. So that's still a very generous plan for your employees.
Quick question. I understand the increase that you're requesting. Are we increasing the cost to employees?
That is actually up for discussion now, so
Okay.
thank you. That was a perfect segue.
And I'll ask another quick question.
Sure.
I assume you did this, but I assume that we, staying with Florida Blue, I assume we still shopped around to Avent and others?
No, sir. So
We did not shop around and get any competitive bids?
Not for administrative costs, no, because when we looked at your analysis last year, Florida Blue was far superior for the PPO discounts in the Flagler County area specifically, but also into Volusia and St. John's. So when we look at, for example, your peers, like the county, the school board, any of the surrounding public entities, they've all made the choice after looking at the network discounts to be with Florida Blue because Aetna, for example, has such a lesser discount. It can cost you an additional hundreds of thousands of dollars to that weekend discount level.
So how often do we shop around?
So every 3 to 4 years,
Every 3 to
typically
4
for
years,
admin
okay.
fees.
All right.
Vice Mayor, that's just the admin piece, because they had done a healthy marketing, they call it marketing, request for quotes in advance of today. And I'm sorry, what month number are we in the year-to-date?
8 months.
So 8. So we've only got 4 more to go, so it's unlikely that you're going to see, trend-wise, a positive change for us at this point,
Thank you.
actuarially.
Yeah, I think that we are close enough to your renewal date that this is a credible projection.
Got it.
And one more question, and these numbers seem to represent the answer that I'm already going to get. The 88% that we cover as part of this, is that within the realm of normality? It seems to be with this city employee contribution chart on here, but is that normal?
So it varies pretty widely, I would say. There are some protections for employee-only coverage because of the Affordable Care Act. So you cannot have an employee's cost be more than 8.32% of their monthly income. But for family coverage, there isn't really a guardrail for what that cost could be. So for example, the school board does a defined contribution. They pay a certain dollar amount. Employees have to pay the full cost if they want family coverage. I have some groups where the city will pay 100% of employee only and then only 50% for those with dependent coverage. So it just depends on what you have set up. I think that you all are very generous in the fact that you do pay 81% for those with family coverage. And then that employee is still at that 94% range, which is beyond affordable for them.
A question of curiosity. I'm looking at I think it was an average age perhaps that you had mentioned in there. We have a relatively few number of employees that are much higher, which is drastically different than the demographic of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we compare with, I guess, municipalities or the county in close proximity in terms of age? Are we
Age?
about the same, or are we unique in any way?
We're generally about the same.
About the same.
Yes. Those entities that are heavier on police and fire tend to have a younger demographic, if that makes sense. But those, like the school board has an older demographic, for example. Those teachers tend to stay for longer.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, thank you.
So under this model, we are looking at, we're providing two options for your consideration, and we can certainly discuss any other ones that you would like to see. Option one is a 12% increase to the employees. So that would be a 783% or 783,000 increase for the city and 100,000 for the employees. This is splitting proportionately. So if you were to maintain the percentages that you see in that second column, this would be, you would continue those same percentages moving into this renewal season, and you would split the increased 12% employees, 12% to the city. On the far right, you can see what the employee contribution would be versus on the far left, this is your current plan year. So the increase column is the second from the right. For example, someone on the health savings account HSA plan with family coverage would have a $45.90 increase per month. And it flows all the way up and down from there.
And that increase is kind of a net increase. You pay more, but you get the same.
Correct.
There's no, okay.
Yep, there is not an enhancement with that. It's just
Of any
splitting the
kind.
cost of the increase with the employees.
Okay.
And just to elaborate on that, there are different ways of doing this. So some of my groups pay, like I said, a defined percentage and pass the full increase on to the employees beyond that. Some maintain a set percentage, which is what this model would represent. Others say, I want to only give the employees a 10% increase, and we'll absorb the rest of that. And it skews the percentages a little bit by going that direction.
So my question may be premature because you haven't gone through the other options yet, but at some point in time, I'm going to need to have a feel for out in the private sector. I mean, you know, our folks, just because they work for the city, are no different from the folks that are working outside of the city. So what is their, what are they having to bear in terms of, they got to be suffering the same problem, I would think. So, but you want to wait till you get through your options, that's fine.
I can address that now. I think it's appropriate. It depends on the size of the private sector employer specifically, because if they have enough money, they're going to try to be as generous as they can right now. It's still a competitive, tight labor market. Those that are smaller do what they can, and they're having to sacrifice in the form of higher deductibles, higher co-pays to try to buy down that increase. So it can range.
Yeah, tough question, okay.
Option two. So this is a 10% increase to the employees, with the city increase going to a 12.5%. So since you pay a higher percentage in general, that's why it's only 12.5% here and 10% to the employees. So that does provide a slightly less of an increase for the employees. And so really the percentage of the employee versus city contribution, it holds pretty consistently. I think 10, 6, 10, 8, 19. The dollar amount isn't heavy enough to skew it more than like a half a percentage point in the employee's favor. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
So I do have one question before everybody. The city manager, I don't know when this decision is due. This is part of our budget process, I assume.
Correct.
So do you have time to go out and talk to, obviously, your directors, but the employees of the city in terms of communicating, the information that we're hearing today?
We do communicate this message through open enrollment, which that time comes around in August. So we will start hitting the road soon on this decision and educate the employees.
Okay. All right, so comments from city council members at this time, please.
Sure. I think that one of the, actually the cornerstone of our city are our staff. So I'd like to see us try to do as best we can by our employees, whether or not that means a higher contribution from the city. I think without talking about COLA increases or pay increases, for someone who's on staff with a family, almost $450 a year increase is semi-substantial. So I think it's in our best interest to treat our employees with their best interests at our heart. And that's my opinion. I understand that. I think the overall message that the mayor was trying to establish earlier is the insurance market, whether or not you're private or public, has been increasing slightly and at a steady rate. And I shouldn't even say slightly, but so I think no matter what, we're going to face an increase, but I think our priority should be to do best by our employees.
Councilwoman?
Yes, I agree with Council Member Clufus. There's not a huge difference between the two different plans, and our staff and employees are very important, so I too believe that we should work in their favor and keep their costs lessened.
Okay. Councilwoman?
Thank you. Yeah, when I look at the difference between the 10% and the 12%, I see $20,000, and I think every penny of our tax dollars is important. But to the point that I made earlier, when I text our city manager on a Sunday and utility is out there on a Sunday to fix a road for safety issues, that's a testament to the people that work in our organization. So I'm in favor with going the 10% route. I wish we didn't have to increase it on the employees at all. But as a steward of taxpayer dollars, that's a part of this. So, and I know health insurance has been going up across the board. It's not anything special to us. So I appreciate the work that you all did. I appreciate presenting the option, but I'm definitely in favor of the organization incurring that $20,000 and at least helping our employees in that regard.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I honestly wish we could pay for the full cost of medical. When I got my first job in corporate America after the military, it was 100% paid. I mean, for many years. Of course, that was in a galaxy far, far away a long time ago. But I don't see, I think the 10, 12%, going with the 10, it's such a small amount. And keeping our employees healthy is vital to having them do their jobs and not having to struggle, especially with a family. I mean, that is a big chunk of change, obviously, out of anybody's pocket.
Of course.
So I fully get this, and medical costs have gone up, and it's a shame. But yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask, is there anything else the city can do to prevent suffering, these stop-loss catastrophic, is this just part of the business, or is there anything else that we can do from an HR standpoint or, legally and correctly?
We utilize those wellness dollars. We have lunch and learns on a monthly basis. We hold quarterly meetings. We have a benefits fair. We incentivize the biometric screening that we offer. So we are very proactive, and we work really well with Brown & Brown to make sure our employees are educated.
Good, because I think you're hearing from City Council today that there is no single resource more important to this city than our staff. And I think you've heard consensus from City Council members that that's unwavering and something that will always be a priority and an integral pillar for us in the future. So we appreciate your presentation. Does staff need some direction or not?
No, Mayor, we hear consensus to move forward with option 2.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. With that, we'll move to item number 3 under section E, which would be a discussion, the city lobbyist contract, and may I invite you, thank you for your patience, invite you up to a seat in the front, and will you intro?
Sure, Mayor. Based off of your comments from your last business meeting, we have attached to your agenda the lobbyist contract, as well as previous adopted city council legislative priorities. We invited the Southern Group, Ms. Laura Bomer and Mr. Oscar here, Anderson, to really answer some questions that you have, and we're looking for any direction on next steps.
Laura and Oscar, if I may, thank you very much for attending this morning, and I think we'll get right to it. And questions? Would you like to take the lead, or?
I have none at the moment.
Good.
Good morning. So thank you both so much for being here. This is so important for our city, for the council up here, and also for the public to understand what goes on in Tallahassee is just so intricate, and that's the nicest word I think I could probably attach to it. I don't know what other euphemisms we could throw out there, but I appreciate the work, first of all, that you all have done, and I don't want to minimize what has been done, what has been accomplished. I think if you watched the city council meeting last week, one of the big questions that I have, and it's attached to the issue that I had, was what kind of heads up or communication do you all receive from those who kind of have the inside track on what the final decisions will be? Because I recall when we were first talking about our priorities, one of the reasons that we really pushed for the water projects was because we were explicitly told Governor DeSantis cares deeply about these projects. This is a time to ask. This is a time to go forward with these priorities. And then we see that out of $35 million for one of our water projects, we were given only $1 million, and then that was vetoed. The other water projects were not awarded. We also had some vital stormwater projects that we did not get any monies for, and then we had that very important for our community YMCA that Senator Leek worked hard for, and then that was vetoed. So I think what I'm looking for is, how do we move forward in a better way? How do we communicate better? And how can we be educated so that in the future we know what we should ask for? Current infrastructure is so important, and while the road that we did get monies for will help us invest for our future, we have 108,000 residents that live here now. And so I have some deep concerns about why those monies were specifically rewarded, despite a lot of the communications that came from this dais to you all when we decided on our appropriation. So I'll give you the floor. I thank you very much for being here. I know it's a little bit of an awkward situation, I'll be quite honest with you, but I appreciate your candor and your accountability in being here today.
Can we frame that up? Well, hold on. Any comment? I was going to ask you to kind of frame it up into a question to help them get started a little bit.
Do you understand the inquiry? Okay.
Good. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm happy to clear it up.
It was a galaxy far, far away.
No, that's okay.
So let me just, if I may, let me ask the city council members just to help you out here. Any comment before we hand over the mic?
I appreciate everything you guys have done on the behalf of City of Palm Coast. Thank you for coming today. I also would agree that it's important for not only our council, but the public to understand the process that occurs up in Tallahassee. I would say it's dynamic would be another way to put it. I guess that's another word. Yeah, it's an interesting process, and if you could just elaborate on how the budget is actually brought before the governor, kind of even the environment around the governor when he's going through line item by line item, what that looks like. And again, I just thank you guys for being here. It's there's a little bit of fog of war that exists between Tallahassee and the city of Palm Coast, and at the end of the day, it's sort of a black box that we get told what we get appropriated and what comes funneling down. So if you could shed some light on that, I think that would help everything.
Councilwoman, any comment before they begin?
I too thank you very much for coming out. And I agree both with Councilwoman Pontieri and Councilmember Clufus. I think that we all agree that we are looking for more clarification as to why there are so many items that were actually given and then vetoed, and recalled back. So we would just like more clarification on that. Thank
Very,
you.
very good. So you've heard from City Council, so if I can kind of offer you the floor now to explain yourselves.
You want to start us off, Laura?
Okay. Number of questions. Let's start off with the process. So I want to be very clear that we do not prioritize any of your projects over the other with the governor's office. We meet with the Office of Policy and Budget once the budget, well, actually, before the budget's even passed. We go through the merits of all of our projects. Your staff answers detailed questions to the OPB staff, and then they make their assessment. I can tell you that this year there were over $200 million worth of water project vetoes. I have 5 pages of them here. Every single local government I represent had a water project or multiple water projects vetoed. I don't think that that means that water quality is not important to the legislature or the governor. This year, there is historic funding that was put into both the Resilient Florida Grant Program and the Water Quality Improvement Grant Program. The legislature funded it roughly around $200 million, and then with the Seminole Gaming Compact Bill, an additional almost $200 million was going into those programs. So there's $400 million in grant monies available for us to go after these water projects that were vetoed. Additionally, once the vetoes were announced, DEP extended their grant portal for this fiscal year, so we can still apply for those grant monies in both of those programs up until July 15th. So we were very disappointed, always disappointed to see vetoes happen, but the bright side for us is that we have another avenue to pursue the funding for all of these projects and maybe even additional funding. Had the other projects, like the road projects, for example, been vetoed, we wouldn't have the opportunity to go after additional funding. There is no grant monies available for us to get additional infrastructure money for roads. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, and this is a conversation we're having with all of our local governments, regrettably, because the water quality projects and wastewater projects were kind of like gold for the first few years with the governor. He always approved them all. And then the legislature put so much money in these grant programs that we kind of got word that your water projects are probably all going to go because we want to shift everybody to this grant program. Those funding sources, by the way, are perpetual. They're like every year, so they're not going to be subject to the vagaries of the legislative process. So this is not an atypical conversation. That all our local governments are having the same thing. We're having the same education with them about all the other grants they can go pursue and trying to help them as well.
But I would say, I don't think that there is another, I mean, we talked about this. I don't know that there's another local government in the state of Florida that we can think of in the past 10 years, at least.
Since I've been doing this,
Forever.
20.
Yeah, I've been doing it 15 years, that has ever received as much funding as the city of Palm Coast has received the past 2 years.
So if I may, what I hear, the elephant in the room is I don't think it's exactly transparency, it's more the communication and the timeliness of communication through the session. So in advance of a forthcoming RFP, because that's the procedure that obviously we're going to have to follow, can you suggest, based on your long experience, what's the best way for our city lobbyist to update city council? I'm going to leave staff out because they're in the middle of that, obviously. But how can we best know? I think the word vagaries of Tallahassee was used before. How can we best be kept up to date? Well, 2 things. How can we best shape our asks in advance? Because it's complicated now because we're working in tandem or collaboratively with the county, who has a different lobbyist. And then how can we be kept kept current as we move through? Is that fair enough?
Yes, because the way that I look at this is, you just said that we got some word that, water projects may not get funded in the appropriations because of monies being put elsewhere. I guess, when was that notification, or when did you all learn that? So that for the future, we know, okay, we may have to change tactics. We may need to be malleable here because we have all these stormwater projects. So maybe we really advocate for those and kind of take these water projects off, knowing that we're going to need to apply for grants. And oh, by the way, now we can put staff on that as well and start working on those. You know, I'm really hesitant to just say, oh, okay, well, we can go after other grants because they're competitive. There's certain criteria that you have to meet for projects to qualify for grants, and it takes staff time and resources, and it's a pretty specific process and a very detailed process a lot of times. So I agree. I'm looking for, you know, kind of how do we improve going forward, because we may have to change paths and tactics and priorities, no pun intended, so that we can get the most bang for our buck and really go after what we are looking that the legislator and that the governor is in fact okay with striking his pen to.
Good, and just as a footnote to your comment, I agree. And remember that we're also not hamstrung, but we're strapped with a strategic action plan or priorities, which, you know, we vote on, and they're not necessarily as flexible. However, I could see the ability to perhaps change priorities as we needed to. But anyway, so I'll let you kind of answer that as you can.
I mean, I heard the rumor probably 2 weeks ago. I mean, we hear rumors all the time. So I could report all the rumors I hear. You would get tired of hearing from me. And so it was probably said in passing to somebody in the firm who repeated it to me. Like, it wasn't and so we hear those things all the time. So how we pass that message on is a little up to you. I mean, how involved you want to be in this process is up to you. Every one of our local governments is different on how we interact with them, what the information they want, the timeliness of it. Some of them understand it's just sort of the process, and they're like, we know you're going to do your best. Some of them want to know, have real regular updates. That's up to you all. I mean, I don't know that we have best practices on that. You're the client. We do it however you want to do it.
And I wouldn't say that maybe we failed or we were misguided on developing our priorities, because there are only certain areas of the budget where we can get line item appropriations, right? There are road funds, there are water project funds,
Right.
there's some park funds, you know, fire stations, parks, what am I missing? Economic development. So there's only certain areas within the state budget that we can actually apply for direct appropriations from. So, and I think we've covered our bases. Speaker Renner, Senator Hudson, you know, we met with them and we tried to apply for as many of the different pots of money as we could to see how much money we could bring into the city, and we're very successful at doing that. Like he said, at the end of the day, you know, we got word that the water projects were probably going to be subject to the veto pen because of this historic funding that was put into the grants, but we didn't get, you know, no one called us and said, hey, you know,
Right.
here's the list, right? We all get it at the same time, you get it, unfortunately.
So to Councilwoman Pontier's point and kind of intro, we are facing a very, very different landscape going forward. So I think this is an opportune time to readdress and to look at how we want to build this process and initiative for the future, because, you know, what we enjoyed yesterday is not what it's going to be like tomorrow. So I think this is that perfect opportunity. Can you comment to that?
I mean, look, most of the local governments we work with, they pick 2 or 3 projects they support, and these are $2 million projects, and, you know, they're pretty happy if they get one or both, or especially if they get all 3 of them. So to put it in perspective, and I guess it's hard to know, you have had a huge advantage having the Dean of the Senate and the Speaker of the House here. And they both made it clear that they were going to try to do as much as they could all across the budget and be as successful as they could. And I mean, it was a little disheartening to hear that you guys thought we failed, because this is like record stuff. Like, I'm going to talk about what we've done for Palm Coast is like a huge point of pride around the state, because it really was record funding from that perspective. So.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear. It's because I was attacked in the media for this. I'm not ungrateful for what we have gotten. It is more, I don't want our residents to feel like they're being left behind for the future of Palm Coast, and that is how they feel. And I don't blame them, right? So it's not just communication from Tallahassee to us. It's so that we can also communicate with and educate our residents and let them know, hey, you know, before we get the list, or, you know, let them know that we are trying for you. These are the steps that we've taken to ensure that we are prioritizing and we're expressing to our representatives how important XYZ is. And to that point, I think that as we look at the process, there should be a couple days out of the year that all of City Council goes to Tallahassee. and that we accompany staff there, because I know that there are certain staff members and one or two members of council, specifically you, Mayor, that can go up to Tallahassee, and I appreciate that, but I think it's incumbent upon us as representatives to go maybe 2 days out of the session. I would leave it up to you, whatever is probably standard with other cities and counties for you all. But I know the county, there are multiple members that go up to Tallahassee to represent the interests of their residents. I think it would not only be educational for us, but then our residents know that there is not one priority of council that's being pushed over the other, that we are a united group and a front that is going up there with a list of priorities that we think furthers our strategic action plan and represents all of our residents and not just one or two interests. So I'll leave it to you to, in your discretion, or not, I shouldn't say discretion, but, kind of your experience as to what other cities and counties do. But as far as process goes, that's what I would recommend for us. I would also recommend, just for transparency, that at any time when a council member or a staff member is going to Tallahassee specifically for appropriations, that we be notified, because I get word from other people, residents, hey, did you know that so-and-so is in Tallahassee this weekend advocating for XYZ? And I didn't know that. And I don't think that that's appropriate. We represent the residents. We should know what's going on, especially when we're dealing with this amount of money. So I do appreciate what you all have done. My issue is the bucket that these monies are going into, and it's not current Palm Coast. And that's what really, and I know that there's only so much that you can do about that, but I was just so ardent about that concern, and I feel like it wasn't advocated enough for in Tallahassee this year. So I welcome us to continue to work together in the future, but I would like to see an ardent change to the process.
And I'll commit to you, council member, we have excellent relationships with the DEP staff, with the secretaries. We will do whatever we can on our end to ensure that, we can apply for this grant money and get as much money back to the city of Palm Coast.
And I greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
And to the councilwoman's point, I think Tallahassee, our legislators have made it very clear that this collaborative approach between the city and the county in particular, they favor. In other words, they very much appreciate our coming together and unifying, as you suggest, and certainly as a city council, that we all kind of work hand in hand in terms of presentation, knowledge of the ask, and how the process is going. So I would applaud that.
Yeah, I would also just want to state that I have found our state representatives, especially our state representatives, very accessible, always answering my phone calls and addressing issues, and I would encourage everyone to open that line of communication if you don't have it, because it's very vital. And I know firsthand, anytime I want to go to Tallahassee, I can go to Tallahassee and meet with folks, and it's just a matter of a phone call and setting it up. So I do think, though, I do encourage everyone to be more involved. And I want to thank you guys for what you do. I know it's not easy getting us everything we wish. It's, kind of like Santa Claus didn't bring us our presents this year, but maybe next year we'll get more presents. But please keep up the pressure.
Councilwoman, any comment?
No comment.
Okay, and Councilman Clufus.
Thank you guys for being here today. I greatly appreciate the explanation of everything, and I think incredibly successful. If you could just briefly touch, maybe give us your elevator pitch on why it's really important for cities, municipalities, counties to be represented by the correct lobbyist groups in Tallahassee, and the benefit to having Southern Group as our representatives compared to potentially, other suitors out there who may try to, no pun intended, lobby the city to become our representative. Why is it important that we have solid representation?
I guess I could start that. The Southern Group, sometimes our competitors may knock us because we are the largest firm in the state, but that's our advantage, right? So we have offices strategically located throughout the state of Florida. We have an office in Jacksonville, we have an office in Tallahassee, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Florida Keys, Broward now. And the reason that's so important is because leadership comes from all over the state of Florida, right? So this way, if there is a committee chairman, let's say, from Broward County that Oscar and I don't know, we can call our partner in Broward and we have direct access to those members. They go to church, they go to the grocery store with these folks, and so they have really personal relationships, and that allows us as a team to be even more successful. Additionally, we've drawn very, very, very talented people out of state government at the executive branch level. We have former DOT secretaries, former DMS secretaries.
Former local government lobbyists.
Yeah, right. Former DEP staff. So again, we have those, relationships within the state agencies to help our clients achieve their goals, not just at the state level, the legislative level, but at the executive level.
Excellent. That's a good answer.
And you have local government people too.
And everybody hates the public meetings, always hard, talks about it, fundraising is a big part of my life and her life too, and we raise a lot of money for leadership that you guys can't do, and you get the benefit of that whenever we go up there and advocate for you, so that as well.
Very well said, thank you. That was concise, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Well, without any additional questions, I am going to open up for public comment in just a minute. Any other statements that you feel important to share or in terms of education, help us with at this moment, or?
The only thing I would add, sorry, Oscar, is that, sometimes we get accused of over-communicating. So we actually have full-time content people on staff during session that we've hired. So if we're following legislation, we actually create committee reports, which are kind of like the minutes of a meeting, right? Like you can see all of the testimony. You can see, who came to oppose the bill, who came to support the bill. We put out every week an update of all the bills that passed. We have a tracking sheet. So whatever you need from us to better communicate with your constituents, we are here, we are available. We can create something particularly for Palm Coast. So we can work together in the future to kind of craft that so that we can communicate with the council better, but also that you can communicate with the public better.
Thank you.
If I may, Mayor,
Please,
just to respond to that, I would greatly appreciate that. I know specifically we've had discussion up here kind of monitoring constantly the Airbnb legislation. I get my updates because I'm on a Florida League of Cities newsletter about legislation, and I phone into their Monday morning calls for their updates. So something like that would greatly help us, not only so that we can make sure if there's our code that we need to update, kind of get in there before changes are made sometimes, but also so that as we're working through our strategic action plan in our budget, we know that, hey, we're probably not going to get certain monies here, here, and here, so we need to dedicate our own monies for these things rather than waiting another year. So I don't think there's a such thing as over-communication myself, but I can't speak for my colleagues. But yeah, something like that can be orchestrated. That would be just tremendously helpful for us as policymakers.
Very good. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask you to hold your seat for a moment. I am going to, if there are no other questions, I am going to open up this item and the prior two presentations to public comment. This is not a Q&A, but perhaps if there's an item that you could be helpful in responding to while you're still here, I would open up at this time to the public for any comment on any of the three presentations that were delivered this morning. Yes, sir.
Peter Johnson, Palm Coast. I'll get to this. I'm going to go back to one of the original presentations, and I'm probably going to open up a can of worms. In regards to the fire department funding, since Mr. Kloufas brought up the point that can we basically respond for calls of service, or can we charge for calls of service based off of the fire department? The way that our city is set up is that we have Palm Coast Fire Department, building and staff with the fire. We service through Flagler County Fire Rescue for 95% of our calls, which are EMS. Are we just giving is all of that money going to the county? And I know the answer to this. My question is, can we do a better job at maybe, since we are providing the buildings, arguably the calls with our population, and providing all the additional staff support as we have fire trucks chasing ambulances to every single call that's an EMS that the county runs, that we don't see a dime for, but that stresses our department in the sense of staff, funding, and the equipment that the burden is placed on, because these trucks cost $5, $6, $7 million, some of them. Just a thought process. I would advise you go talk to Heidi Petito. Her husband was actually the fire chief when I was with Flagler County Fire Rescue, so she has an intimate knowledge of this, and I think more can be done. Follow-up question, which one thing, the main question seems to be getting avoided, but they've sort of alluded to it. They didn't put forward our priorities. So who put forward our priorities for the state? Who asked for these specific appropriations? Because the appropriation requests were wrong. I can think of 17 other things that we could have asked for, some of which she mentioned, including economic development, which we saw a presentation on today, that's going to cost upwards of $1 million. Why wasn't that an ask to the state? Why did we ask for those roads to begin with, and who made that a priority? Because while it wasn't a priority and nothing is prioritized, by putting them into the options, they become fair game. And it's easy to veto other stuff when you can approve certain things. So I think the public deserves the answer as to who made that specifically. Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. And next. City Manager, I'll let you respond to that when we get finished with public comment.
My name is Celia Puglisi, and I live here since 1991.
So you pull it just a little bit closer, okay, thank you.
My name is Celia Puglisi, and I live here since 1991. Sometimes I watch the meetings at my house, and I would say half of the time, what comes out, the sound is too low to hear, especially when we have people here talking. That should be resolved because we have a communications IT department, which is pretty expensive to the taxpayer. So we need to get the services we pay for. First, regarding our lobbyist, I totally agree with Councilwoman Pontieri that when our lobbyists go to Tallahassee, they should not only go with somebody from our staff. No. We elected officials have to be invited, and all those that can make it and are willing to make it and represented are supposed to be there. Did we have a former Home Builders Association director of 15 years going to Tallahassee with our lobbyists? That's what we got, and we didn't get what we needed. This is a question I'm asking. I don't know. I think so. Maybe that have happened. But we just don't even know that. We need more transparency and see who goes with our lobbyists to Tallahassee. And they will follow what our elected officials ask them to do. And our elected officials need to make the decisions, not our administrators. Our elected officials are supposed to tell the administration what we want for them to materialize and to do. And it's not happening that way in Palm Coast, the way I see it. So unfortunately, we need to resolve that. One other thing is, as a resident, we have 6 months of the current elected officials. Some things have done right, some things were not even done. No Florida Park Drive, no Cimarron, no other many things that we were looking for, and we had dreams before these administrations that they were going to be completed, like the islands, the 2 traffic calming islands in Florida Park Drive were not done. We lost 1,100 of our residents, lost, among them some handicapped, special needs, elderly, and people with limited incomes. Their children are going to be hanging in the street and going to the pool. They lost the membership to the pool, given the decision of 3 board members in the school. City done absolutely nothing about it, and I begged them to do. So all those things are all pending, and things that affect us really bad. The flood issues for the residents, for higher built, next door lots were not resolved neither. So I'm asking you, do something in these 6 months, please. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else want to address me in public comment on the prior 3 agenda items? Yes, sir.
Mike Norris, 2 Lima Place. Everything you guys do up there is about freeing up funds in the general fund. And that's why you go to Tallahassee and say, we need this money because we can't pay for it. We need that help. I would like to ask, who keeps your calendar, Mayor? Who keeps your calendar? Do you keep a copy of his calendar, Ms. Johnson?
Direct your questions to me, please.
Okay, so my question is, well, let's start off with this here. Back in May last year, 2003, this is an article by Mark Harper from the Daytona News Journal. Palm Coast growth aspirations boosted by expected $54 million in state budgeting. Okay, so in that article, you're bragging about doubling the size of our footprint for this city, and our infrastructure is suffering. And you're bragging about doubling the size of our city. Okay, my question about the calendar is from November 14th. You weren't here, Mr. Danko led the the council during the meeting when Mr. Flanagan presented that water rate study. So I'd like to know where Mr. Alphen was on the 14th to start off with. So we started out at the 14th. Mr. Flanagan presented that study saying that we have to increase the water rates to pay for this infrastructure. That was one of the asks in Tallahassee, $35 million for that wastewater treatment facility. January 9th, the legislative session started, and it ended on March 8th. On the 5th of March was the next time Mr. Flanagan presented that study and said, hey, this is what we need. So what happened between November and January that you couldn't speak with the lobbyists and say, hey, this is a critical element for our city, and we need that money to fix that water treatment facility? So you're not prioritizing. What's happening here is special interest won over in this legislative session, actually the last two. Because all that money's going out west. That road does not benefit anyone in the interior of Palm Coast at all. No one is going to take Matanzas Wood Parkway out a 2-mile loop around the Palm Coast Parkway. It's not happening. All that area is for further development, more housing, stuffing more people in here. So you Mayor, you failed this city, and I'm going to put you out of office.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker, please. Are there any other members of the public? Yes, sir.
All right, I hate to beat a dead horse to death, but again, I'd like to ask, was anything mentioned?
Please, sir, that's okay, yeah.
Was anything mentioned about these Airbnbs and short-term rentals? It's a nightmare. Again, I know I'm beating a dead horse to death, but there's a house on our street that's for sale, and the whole block is upset about what's going to happen with that house. So I'm hoping when they go to Tallahassee that they can bring that up. I don't know if they have, or if the city has tried to get something done in our favor, to at least give the county and the city some say, something, because we have nothing that we can do about anything. And it's getting worse. There's more and more houses that are being turned into these short-term rentals. There's more advertising for it. Facebook even has pages where they say, turn your home into a rental. You can make, whatever, $5,000 a week or whatever. So it's just going to get worse, and we need to do something about it. They're running hotels in single-family residential neighborhoods. And like I say, some of them, they're going in as limited, so they're corporations that are in our neighborhood. And I don't think they belong there. And I think that anyone that is around one is not happy with it. They're very unhappy with what's going on. There are probably places in Palm Coast that would be fine for it, but not in these places where you have parking for just a couple people, and you have kids, and you have, basically they're coming to party. I understand that, they're going to do that. The canals now, I live on a canal, and I'm seeing these boats coming up and down that are renting these places, and they're speeding up and down the canal, young kids with no life jackets on, and also kids hanging over the bow of the boat. If they fall off, they're going to get run over. So safety is another issue. So I'm hoping that when they go to the Tallahassee that they can put a word in for us.
Appreciate your comment. And while I have you in the chair, with regard to the pending legislation for, what is the bill actually called?
Vacation rentals.
Vacation rentals. Can you share with us, do you have instructions, or are you needing instructions from this city council through the city manager on how to protect our interests with regard to vacation rentals?
I think we've heard local governments loud and clear, specifically the city of Palm Coast loud and clear.
And you may want to refer back to, the county has been in this fight for the better part of 10 years.
Yeah, every bit, yeah. And we work with the league a lot on this, and the Association of Counties, to try to.
I can tell you, the governor has the bill. He has until July 2nd to act on it. He's vetoed the bill in the past. So, we don't have any word at this point which way he's leaning. I can tell you that local governments obviously are lobbying against the bill. There are a lot of other interests that are lobbying against the bill.
Yeah, sure.
There's probably only one interest that's lobbying for the bill. So I would be surprised if it gets through the governor's veto pen, but I don't know the answer.
And to Councilwoman Pontieri's point earlier, It is, it's an ongoing priority to this city council. So I would ask you to please continue to communicate the issue through city manager. City manager, you'll need to keep us up to date. Because, so for example, when you said the bill has not yet been signed and could be vetoed, I think there are very few probably in the room that are fluent in understanding what even that means. In other words, what is it that would be approved or not approved? And I do believe that it would be important for this city council to be fluent enough to be able to share that out in the public. Like, I don't want to falsely set expectations. So if it gets vetoed, I'm not sure that's going to satisfy everybody's expectation, or vice versa. So communication, to your point, I think would be incredibly important there. And perhaps even the, I hate to say the word palm card or the Cliff Notes or whatever, might be a good place to start to show us how we can spread correct, non-fake news to our community so that we can become not just the author, but the communicator, the ambassador, the source of correct, current, timely information. Okay? Any other public comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Steve Carr, Palmcoast. When I listen to this, I know it will take money for traffic calming plan. Okay, I'm not sure how we would go about lobbying Tallahassee to get that. Just curious. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any other members of the public want to address me at this time regarding the three presentations? Seeing no one step forward, I will close public participation. And again, I thank you for your patience today and your presentation. And obviously, our level of communication has increased dramatically. So we'll keep it going.
Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Open up to public participation on any of the items that were not previously discussed or a part of the preceding agenda.
Yeah, I would like to respond to it.
Well, hold on. Okay, so I'm sorry, City Council, you have the opportunity to.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson, then I'll respond afterwards.
So are you referring to the fire level of service?
The transport, I think, that Flagler County, it probably revolves around transport to hospital.
So I think you need to talk about the process through the SAP and with the county and the publication and the votes up here.
Sure.
So that's the process that we followed.
Sure, no problem. So City Council sets the annual strategic action plan, and through that process, they identify their legislative priorities, and each year, City Council takes action to adopt those legislative priorities, and from that adoption, we work with our lobbyists to identify those buckets of funding that could go towards those projects, and then our lobbyist works throughout the season.
And the SAP for this past session was unanimously voted on in a public meeting after it had been workshopped at least once prior to that.
Every year, Mayor, yes. And if Mr. Johnson would like a copy of those previous adopted
Well, he can ask. That's
priorities,
fine.
we can
Good.
get those to you.
Very good. Thank you for your question. Yes.
If I may just respond to a few, I understand the impetus of the question, because one of the issues that I had was, how is it that we really narrowed down the priorities in Tallahassee, whether or not that's done? Ms. Bomer, you've said to me that that was not done. You all did not narrow down or prioritize any more than what we sent. My point was simply, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I won't, but my point was simply, I think if in the future we are all present to make sure that we are pushing certain priorities that we know all of our residents are really concerned about, then there is more transparency in the process, and that's what I'm looking for. Just really quickly, in response to another comment on Summerall and Florida Park, the traffic calming, we as City Council came to consensus that we are moving forward with implementing a pilot program for traffic calming on certain roads. We're getting costs for those, I believe, from City Manager is nodding her head. And we are also drafting a traffic calming plan so that we can implement certain mechanisms for other streets as well. So that is being worked on. It's not being ignored. It's not being overlooked. We are putting monies towards that actively as we speak. So we hear you. And public safety, I think, has been a very important priority for this council, and we are moving forward towards that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any final response to any public comment today?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, I'm curious if our staff could actually make an analog to what type of traffic calming measures we have here in Town Center. If you exit and you go towards Old Kings, there's traffic calming measures here, but oftentimes we get tripped up in the verbiage of whether these are safety tables, traffic cushions, bumps, we don't call them speed bumps, but if we could just clear that area so that we could have clarification upon what exists in Town Center, just so we know whether or not that's what we're all talking about, so we can have a clear definition. The next thing I would say, could we formalize what we can do legally with the swimming pool situation as a city? Because I see a lot of information next door claiming that the city is the one shutting down, the pools in interest of $33 million on pickleball courts, which is not true. But can we just definitively say for once whose role that is to make those decisions and why the city cannot engage or inject ourselves in between there without, an invite? And then the other thing I would say is no one's going to take the loop road out to Matanzas Woods unless we actually discuss the $97 million athletic facility in the same breath. So individually, these things are line items, but when we look at them holistically, we can say, hey, the future of Palm Coast, which ITT designed for well over double our current population, this is how we want to get to those junctures in the future, and this is what that's going to mean. But if we could just quickly go over what we have available to us in the pool, and then the speed bumps in Town Center. You don't even have to answer the question about the speed bumps right now. I know that might be a little back and forth, but if we could just clarify our role as a city with the pool, that would be helpful.
So that's a question, I guess, probably for council. If you could, I'll ask you at the next meeting if you could just give us a quick where we stand with that. So if for nothing else, we're all speaking the same language and offering the same message, so we cut through some of the noise out there if we could. Very good.
Oh, also one more thing, I heard it mentioned in some comments, just that Flagler County and their emergency response teams they're the ones who are allowed to deliver to the hospitals. I don't know all of the details or correct verbiage on how to say that, but Flagler County is the only one who can actually take people to the hospital.
Yeah, they transport.
Okay, so, any other final response to public comment?
Just one last thing. I would encourage the public to stay continue to stay very, very involved in the comp plan process and also in the process as we look west, because that opportunity is an opportunity for economic development. We are out of room in Palm Coast largely for economic development. So going west provides more land to be able to have an economic catalyst to really even out our tax base, diversify the way we've been looking for. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be all economic development. Obviously, that's not the case. But my point is, please, please, please keep an eye on our agendas and stay involved in the process and remain knowledgeable as to what we're doing out there. We want your input. We want your feedback. I think if anything, what we've shown through the comp plan amendment is that we want to hear from you all. So moving west is not an exception to that. So please continue to stay involved and educated on what exactly we're trying to do, because we're trying to do some pretty cool stuff. And it takes money, obviously, but we want to make sure that we get public feedback and that translates into what out west actually becomes. So please stay involved and knowledgeable as to what is going on.
And just a footnote, and not against your comment, but certainly the town hall represents a perfect opportunity to help share that message and help some folks stay better involved. But Councilwoman Hyder.
Yes, I'd just like to share that I have a huge concern regarding the Airbnb homes in the city of Palm Coast, because as we hear from our community, that they have become a large disturbance to the people that own homes in these communities here in Palm Coast. So as you're out there, as lobbyists, please look into this in Tallahassee to see what can be done about it.
Thank you for that. May I consider that your city council comment?
Yes.
Okay, do you have additional now we're at the city council member comments for the conclusion of the meeting. Did you want to add anything to that?
Well, the only thing no, that's it for the meeting, but I do have further comments at the end.
This is it. This is where we're at there, so fire away.
I just wanted to thank Ray Tyner, our city manager, Lauren Johnson, also Brittany and Irene for the wonderful presentation that we did at the community center this past Saturday regarding the 2050 comprehensive plan. They did an amazing job, and they were so well received by the audience that we had. We had a nice turnout, and they are asking that we do this more often and do it again very soon. So thank you very much.
May I reinforce your comment? Mr. Tyner, I'm not going to make you come all the way up, but, and a simple head nod, I think you had a similar experience with a group of rising seventh graders who were beyond your expectation. Can you just, actually, I'll let city manager just quickly, just to reinforce what you said. It was another event, but
Sure, Mayor, City Council. We had the Flagler Schools Civic Camp. They were a group of 7th and 8th graders, and they came here to learn more about the city. We actually let them sit in your seats and conduct a mock council meeting. And then Mr. Tyner facilitated an exercise where they mapped out the future of Palm Coast and what they would like to see. And it's very, very interesting and similar in concept of what we're going through in the comprehensive plan.
gave me every hope and inspiration that we have great opportunity in the future because of these young folks and their incredible willingness to engage, to share, and to help us understand what they think their future should look like. So I was truly inspired by it, so thank you for that. City Council members, final comments for today's meeting. Councilman Clufus.
Yep, two things. They didn't happen to come up with a solution for the street repaving program, did they?
They did not.
It's on their list.
Okay. Number two, I just want to reemphasize kind of a congratulatory moment. Tommy Paul is now the #1 U.S. tennis player, and back in 2016, I had the privilege of awarding the championship trophy to Tommy Paul at our very own Palm Coast Tennis Center. And I think it is very indicative to the magnitude for events that we may be able to have in the future, but also the talent that we can bring through Palm Coast. So in 2016, the current #1 U.S. American player won the Palm Coast Futures event here, and I thought that was something very special, and it kind of is a reflective moment because a lot of people don't follow tennis at that level, but to know that the current #1 American player in the world, the #1 American player, went through Palm Coast, it makes a difference. So I just want to reiterate that.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that with us. Final comments?
I can't top Nick's
No,
last
no
thing,
way.
so I'm just
Councilwoman Ponte, you're good.
Thank
So
you
with
for sharing
that, I would ask Councilor, any final comments?
I just
None
have
today.
one more.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'd like for everyone to keep in mind that on this coming Saturday, speaking of our youth, Culinary Wellness will be doing a business fair at the community center from 11 to 3. So please come out and support our young people who are looking forward to starting their own businesses.
Thank you for that.
As a piggyback to that and a side note, I went last year and it was really cool, and I actually bought a lot of stuff from these kids. They've got some really cool products. They're really motivated. They have business cards, websites, QR codes where you can pay right online. I mean, they're very innovative, and it's just something really cool that our community does. So thank you for bringing that up, and please come out and stop by and look at what they have to say and sell.
City Manager, final comments.
Last final plug for the comprehensive plan. Tomorrow night, we are hosting planning and pizza. We really want to encourage our residents to come out and understand the elements that are going to be on review for PLDRB, which is parks, conservation, coastal, infrastructure, and housing. So we are really narrowing in this final phase of the process and really want to get some last-minute public participation.
Appreciate that. And with that, I would ask for an agenda.
make a motion.
I have a motion from the Vice Mayor to adjourn. May I have a second? Oh, yeah. I have a second from Councilman Clufus. We're adjourned. Thank you all.